I'm here getting ready to introduce our guest tonight. This is a joint project between the Sumas Library and the Senior Center here. We're here to hear very interesting stories about our community from Spud Bronkema. Nice. Somewhere.
That's it?
That's it. Come on up. I'm waiting. Anyhow.
The lady before you said we have donations, and I thought she was going to say we have donuts. I started writing this, and after 10 pages, I thought, man, Spud, you're getting to be a preacher. So I cut her down a bit. I always like to pray first when I speak, so I'm going to pray. Lord Jesus, I ask you to give us the words to speak and the ears to hear. I thank you, Lord Jesus, for this opportunity and praise your holy name. Amen. Ike and Eva, my dad and mom. And there's some really good pictures up here of them. The guy in the high school one, just skip that, that's me. Anyway, I'm supposed to talk about Ike and Eva. And I could talk all night about my mom and dad. I really could. Because, well, there's lots of reasons, but both of them didn't start. Hey, Eileen. It probably didn't start out how we're all supposed to start out. Dad had polio when he was 6 years old, and his leg died. And so, all his life, he had a foot that was about this long. And so that sounds bad enough, but
Pull the mic to your face, Spud.
okay. Dad had polio when he was 6. His leg died, and so the rest of his life he lived with a dead leg. Not completely dead, because there must have been blood in there, but he quit school in the 6th grade because it was depression. And so he went to work at a horse trader's place, training horses when he was in the 6th grade. And the reason, because the family didn't have enough money to live on, so Dad quit his school to become a horse trader, or trainer. My dad was a great man. He was a hard-nosed Dutchman. Well, he was. And I think his brothers were scared of him. But when you can't walk right, people look down on you. And they look down on Ike. And I think actually is almost like he was the black sheep of the family because he was lame. Either way, he had a hard start in life. He was the hardest working man I've ever met. And so, as he grew up, he took on jobs that you wouldn't think a one-legged man could take on, but he did. I've seen him jump on horses. I've seen him at one of these donkey basketball games. at the Nooksack High School, and he'd leap on that mule just like it was, he was just good at what he did. Anyway, he just worked. And the more he worked, I think the better his leg worked. One of the really disadvantages to having one foot shorter than the other, this was during the Depression, when Dad had to buy work shoes, he had to buy 2 pair every time. So when I was a kid, I would see a bunch of shoes, brand new, never used, sitting in the woodshed because Dad's foot wouldn't fit that shoe. It was way too big, or too small, depending. So anyway, that was the beginning of my dad's life. He had a lot of brothers and 1 sister. He lived in Linden. My mom had a rough start too. She was in a big family of boys and girls. And the last daughter that was born, the mother died in childbirth, or just after childbirth. And at the same time, her dad was dealing with diabetes. And it wasn't long after the death of her mother that her dad had his legs cut off. So he took the whole family, except the 2 oldest, who escaped, I think, to the orphanage. And Mom lived at the orphanage in Everett from the time she was probably 6 years old till the time she was 17 or 18 when she moved to Linden to be with her sister. Mom was it's not really fair, but she had the best memory of anybody I ever seen. I wish she was sitting here because she could tell you all the true stories. Anyway, they got together. My mom's sister, where she moved to, was married to my dad's brother. So they got married, so we had brothers marrying sisters. And not long after they got married, my dad was working on Nooksack Mountain as a horse logger for I don't know what company. And it happened that a chain broke. And the whole load hit my dad. And it broke his hip terribly. And I didn't know this till not long before he passed away. I wish he would have done this a lot sooner, but he never told stories at all. And I got to hear quite a few of them the last couple of months before he passed away. But he also was in a coma for about 10 days. And he had broken bones all over the place. And in fact, when I was talking to him in the hospital, and when I sold all our businesses, I started cutting wood and selling wood, which I absolutely loved. It was my all-time favorite job. And he said, "Spud, whatever you do, don't get yourself caught in the bite of the line." I got a feeling there's a lot of you people that never heard the bite of the line before, but I got in a wreck out at Five Corners a few years ago, and I told Harlan Kelly, my insurance agent, that I got caught in the bite of the line. Well, of course, Harlan was a logger, so he knew exactly what I was talking about. Didn't cost me, I didn't get a fine or anything. Anybody gets caught in the bite of the line. Anyway, I ain't going to tell you what a bite of the line is if you don't know. But Dad says, very seriously, "Spud, don't get caught in the bite of the line." So, remember, this is just after the Depression, and there wasn't assistance. Dad and Mom, for a year at least, I don't know how they lived, because they didn't have no money. They had no job because Dad the doctor said he couldn't go to work. And that's how their first year of being married was. And so, after a year, I don't know how they did all this, I have no idea, but Dad was able to go back to work. And he went to work for Elenbass Dairy. Now, Elenbass had their processing dairy, their name was Daffodil, was at the end of the street, main street up here by the border. That first building, that's where they processed, made ice cream, milk, and cream, and everything else that a dairy makes. And Dad was a can hauler. Now, in those days, that's all the milk was shipped by cans. And remember, I told you that Dad had a gimpy leg, but I can't, how many times I seen him carrying 2 full milk cans. Jim!
Yes.
How much does a milk can full of milk weigh? 110?
A lot.
110 pounds? Anyway, he could carry 2 cans.
They're heavy.
Yeah. I think they're about 100 pounds or less. Anyway, he did that. And and that was a different, there's so much difference that's happened now that was then. Every little house, and there was lots of houses on all the back roads to Everson, the Linden, all of them had a cow and a milk stand. Lots and lots of people had cows, and they may have only had one, but Dad still had to pick up the milk, and that's the way it was. And so Elenbass had Dad as a can hauler and Woody Toll as a can hauler. And that's, if there's a hard working job, hauling cans was as hard as it gets. For one thing, when it was snowy and icy, the milk stands where the cans were solid ice. And you had to get off the truck, flatbed truck, and jump on the milk stand. So it was dangerous. And Dad, I used to see him do this every year in the fall, would drive shingle nails in the bottom, along the side of his shoes, so he wouldn't slide off the milk stands. So he started working for Elenbass. He absolutely loved Pete Elenbass. Now, I don't know if there's anybody here that can remember. Yeah, I bet Patty can remember Pete Elenbass. Yeah. But anyway, Dad just loved the guy, and he worked for him for a lot of years. In the meantime, Eva was raising kids. Joe was a hard birth, but she made it. And then Spud, and then Karen. And she also began to work. And she worked at a lot of things. Picked berries. When I was probably 2 years old or 3, I went to the berry patch with Mom. She was a waitress. There was a Coffee Ann, used to be right over here on the other side of the main street. She worked in canneries. And I know I'm forgetting other things she worked at, but she did work. Finally, she went to work at Sumas Mercantile, and I imagine some of you people remember Eva at Sumas Mercantile. Eva and Bill Nyland and Alice Lapp. And they were a good crew. And I don't know how many years Mom worked there, but it was a long time. Now, I should have brought a map with me to explain where all these things are, because they're no more. Elenbass is gone. The Mercantile is gone. It would be where Bromley's had, or where the drugstore was, right, Jim?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so they both worked those jobs for years, but what happened was, actually, a guy from Elenbass invented milk tanks. His name was Benny Crabtree. And Benny Crabtree invented a milk tank that actually put my dad out of a job, because it became, you had to have a tank. And so there wasn't any cans to pick up. So, excuse me, he became the manager of Elenbass Feed, which was on the other side of the border house thing there. And he worked there for years till health, I'm thinking he was around 65 when his health, they wouldn't let him go back to work. I don't think anyone could have had better parents. They taught us kids some very important lessons. One of them was work ethic. It's the only way they knew how to do, and that's what they expected us to do, which I'm so blessed because of that. Also, they were as honest a couple that's ever lived. They treated stealing or lying to us kids, it was like murder. And Joe and I laughed about this a lot because we both heard the same message more than once or twice. Stealing is like murder. And so that's how we were brought up to believe. And I think that's a wonderful, maybe that's a little stern, but we got the message. And so they raised up honest kids. And I couldn't have been prouder of parents than Mom and Dad. Dad passed away, I don't know, 20-some years ago. And Mom, 3 years ago, honey? Where are you at, honey? Oh, there you are. Hi. Oh, you sleeping?
2.5 years old.
2.5? Anyway, like I said before, she was a tough little hombre. 5 foot, maybe. I doubt it, come think of it. That was high heels.
4'10".
4'10". Yeah, I think you're right. But I know she hit me one time on the porch, and I didn't hear for 3 days. I shouldn't have said that. I loved her so much, and in the last 20 years or so, I kind of got the job of, it was no job, that's the wrong word, taking care of my mother. And so we played pinochle every time, 3 games, and she was the most ruthless pinochle player I ever played against, even because it was her son that had nothing to do with hating me when I got the bid or something. So I'll tell you how competitive she was. On the refrigerator was a scorecard till the day she died. Who won the games the night before. So, and I tell people I feel bad because of the 9 months or so that she was in the rest home. I missed 2 days. But like I said, I felt like she was my responsibility. And it goes back for a lot of years from other things. But anyway, she told me things. And when I did her funeral, I looked around when I said some of these things, and my brother and sister hadn't heard them. I couldn't figure it out. She just told me. These were really deep things of God that she told me, and she knew. And I miss her terribly. I really do. Anyway, I'll get down to Spud and Juanita. Spud was born in December 7, 1942, 1 year after Pearl Harbor Day. And my family lived on the Garrison Farm. Now, in them days, all the places had a name. So that was the Garrison Farm. And I'm going to say I would have been about, you folks know what a 2-holer is? There's one. No, she's shaking her head. Yes. Anyway, the Garrison's Farms toilet was a two-holer. There's getting a few hands. Anyway, Joe and I were in the toilet. Now, Joe was on the one over here, and I was playing around. And this speech is going to have a splash. Head first. Joe, of course I don't remember this because I was probably only 16 months old. But Joe said he must have really hollered because Dad was milking and he hit the door so hard and he ripped the door right off the hinges. And he never told me how he fished me out, but they did. So, that's a hard way to start life. Other than, I wrote here, I had a normal childhood. That maybe is a little abnormal. Anyway, when we were 3 years old, we moved to the Markham place. And the old house was still there. Was it 3 stories or 2? 2. And the Gonzers lived next door to us. And I had 3 things that I can very clearly remember in my mind that happened probably when I was 3 years old. First, I told Mom, I'm going to go pick up Joe from school. And in those days, I think Dad had a 27 Chrysler. And in those days, you pushed the starter button, and if the car was in gear, it just went. So it just happened the car was in reverse. And I'm backing out, 3 years old, standing, pushing on the button, and backing out to the road. And Mom stepped out on the porch, and you could have cut her eyes off with a stick. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. I was going to go pick up Joe from school. Nobody got hurt in that one. The next one I remember very clearly was playing on the kitchen table. And the kitchen table had a window right next to the table. And Spud dove out. And I still have the scar right up here somewhere. It was a bloody mess. But I don't remember the blood. I just remember that Eldon Gonzer, I don't know if anybody would remember Eldon Gonzer, put me in his car and took me to the doctor's office, which would be above the B&B Tavern, right over here. Here. Anyway, and there was a lady working there named Bishop. Why can't I think of her first name? Anyway, she would, huh?
What bishop? Which wife?
I don't know if she was married.
It was Eva.
Eva Bishop. And she took such good care of me. I just loved her. Holding me, a little boy, bleeding like a stuck hog. Anyway, for years, and as a matter of fact, I looked the other day because I'd forgot all about the scar. And it is still there, but it's pretty hard to see. But that was 72 years ago. So it did good. And the doctor sewed me up. There was some scared folks that day. I didn't know why. Guy shouldn't jump out a window head first. Mom wasn't happy. I had 3 things that I remembered and I forgot one. Anyway, I had such a wonderful opportunity when I was growing up because I used to ride on the milk truck a lot with my dad or with Woody Toll. And so I developed a wonderful, I call it wonderful, desire to look at trees and get to know what they're called, and especially birds. And I would consider myself a bird watcher. Not the kind that writes everything down and knows how they sing, but if I see a different kind, I remember it, so I go to my bird book and find it. So I've had that all these years from that ride on the milk trucks, looking at animals. Dad and I one day seen a coyote, and Dad had lived here all his life, and he'd never seen a coyote before. We just didn't have them. But what we did have was fox, a lot of beautiful little red fox, but no coyotes. And I don't know why, but one took the place of the other. Things like that. Swans. One day Dad come home, threw the three of us in the truck with him, and drove to the Everson grade school to show us 3 swans. There was no swans here. Now I think you could count 300 at the Everson grade school anytime you go over there in the fall. But that was, I grew such an interest for things like that, to be able to see them and identify them. And it was just what every day when I'd get home from school, I would head for the creek. When it was season or close to the season, I would go fishing. It was an easy thing because, you know, the cows were in the pasture all the time then, and all you had to do is kick over some cow pies and you get all the worms you needed to fish with. True story. And I would go hunting with my BB gun. I'd go over to the Hessagraves Woods or the creek. I was always at one place or the other. And it's just how I was brought up. I just love the outside and the woods and stuff. And I always will. I was scheduled to go hunting next week, and I'm not going to make it because after 32 years or 3, my best friend's son has cancer, so we're not going to Idaho this year. But when I get there, I feel like I'm coming home. I've been there so many years, the ranch that I go to. And yeah, it's a tough deal. I graduated in 1960. It was in 1956, the school changed and went out to the old high school. So I was the 8th grade, and our junior high was out at the old high school. So I started out there when I was an 8th grader. Some of the fun things that I got to be a part of is my uncles, this is probably hard for some of you to believe too, would come up on the first day of hunting season every year and go pheasant hunting from our house. And they'd bring their hunting dogs, and Dad had a hunting dog, and we'd go pheasant hunting. And after I was probably 7 or 8, they let me go along. And I absolutely loved pheasant hunting. And all of those uncles are gone now, of course, but so are the pheasants. They're, I think probably if I had a reason, I would say farming practices have changed that much, that the eggs get cut up before they're hatched because the farmers start farming so much earlier than we did. We used to be cut your hay in July. So we had a lot of pheasants. On my senior year of high school, I got 21 roosters just walking from my folks' place. I was a pretty good shot too. Anyway, that was one of the fun things for me, and especially when my uncles came from Seattle to go pheasant hunting. So now I graduated. It wasn't no struggle. It was easy. I went to Nooksack. I was thinking I would like to tell you about a couple of my school teachers. Mrs. Swanson was my first grade teacher. I preached a sermon about Mrs. Swanson. Every morning, Mrs. Swanson when we'd get to school and sit down, the bell would ring, and she would, of course we said the Pledge of Allegiance, and then she prayed for every one of us. I think by name. The name of the sermon I preached is, "Where Have You Gone, Mrs. Swanson?" At the time I was thinking of the Beatles song, "Where Have You Gone, Mrs. Robinson?" Mrs. Swanson would probably go to prison today. But you know, I said in the sermon, probably quite a few of those kids that got prayed for by their first grade teacher were never prayed for again. Sad story when you think about it. And Mr. Lambert. Mr. Lambert was a biology teacher. I don't know, he taught a lot of things. He's pretty famous in this town. He he taught, I don't know how many years, but he was out there an awful long time. I think the football field is the Lambert Field, isn't it?
Yes.
Anyway, Mr. Lambert had a tremendous love for bird watching. And so, for years, all the boys, in the spring of the year, the girls picked flowers and put them on a board and identified them, and the boys picked wood, cut chunks of wood off and identified them. And he brought up bird watching. He would love to have someone identify birds and have a number of birds like we did with the wood. And oh man, that was right down my alley. So Mr. Lambert and I became buddies. I was thinking about this. You know, all of us have teachers that we remember in school. But it's even better when you can think about things after you're out of school and you're still going and talking to, in this case, Mr. Lambert. I saw a so-and-so the other day, and he would say, "Oh yeah, we have them." It was just neat, because he bowled in the bowling alley over here when I did, so I could talk birds with Mr. Lambert. He was really serious about bird watching. I think he went to China once or something just to see one bird. But he was, those two teachers, now I had a lot of good teachers, but those stick to my mind. One because she prayed, and one because he was a friend for years and years and years, because we talked birds. And so it went long after school, which, I don't know, I think that's a great thing. That's the teachers that I remember. High school was pretty easy, actually. I was always the smallest kid. And I was so happy because when I was a junior in high school, I passed Ellen Tinclay. She was the smallest girl. So I worked for a lot of farmers when I got out of high school, or in high school. Don and Doris, I used to work for them quite a bit. Ernie Terrell had a prize herd of jerseys that I had the opportunity to show his cattle at the Linden Fair. And I did that quite a few years. And Ernie was kind of famous for his cows, Jersey cows. I took county herds to Puyallup Fair, and I just loved it. I still to this day, if I go to the Linden Fair, I don't go to see the fair. I go to watch cattle judging. I just love it. Anyway, that went on, and what happened was, and you used to hear about this quite a bit, but I'd never hear it anymore. My wife and I run off and got married. It was quite a sight. She lived in Agassiz, BC, and I got there this time we set aside. Out on the road, alongside the highway, was my wife with 2 suitcases and 3 boxes of books. And that was, I think, probably on a Wednesday or Thursday. On Friday night, we got married in Sumas, and on Sunday morning, we were on an airplane to Anchorage, Alaska. And the only reason I'm here today alive is because my dad-in-law didn't have a gun. Anyway, it was, we're both always will be indebted to Don and Doris because they got me a job at the dairy up there, and they lived up there, and also let us stay in their house. Should I tell the story of the bell?
No. That's up to you.
Now, I'll just tell you that Don hung a bell under our bed. If you knew Don, that's, that would be normal.
I had nothing to do with
No, I know you didn't, Doris. Anyway, they were so nice, and we got a little house next door, and we lived there for a while, and it was just a special time, a decision that we both had to make because we scared that guy, her dad. Yeah, and then I don't know how many months later after we run away, the Alaska earthquake happened. And everybody up there, I mean, it was at that time the highest, I don't know how you call it, numbered earthquake in history. And the whole town of Anchorage was beat up bad. But I thought, and I think my wife thought, he's still after us.
It happened on his birthday.
Huh?
It happened on his birthday.
Wouldn't you know, it was on his birthday. He was thinking about it. But isn't it a beautiful thing that along came a baby, and then my wife come down here for something, and there's something about little kids that kind of change minds, isn't there?
Yes.
All of a sudden the hatred was going away. And he actually spoke to me later. It was Alaska was a real blessing. I will always have told people that when I went through the earthquake, I'm really glad I did. I don't want to do it again. It was one of those things to be able to experience, but you know that you're probably lucky to be alive.
Yeah, we were all together. Karen was there too.
Everybody moved into Doris's house.
No, we moved over to Karen.
That's right, we had to move because she's pregnant or something, wasn't she?
I can't remember that.
Anyway, we moved to Louis
Jim
and Karen,
Mark were there.
and they were closer to where the where the houses fell in the bay.
What year was that?
64.
64. March 27th.
Yeah. I can't even explain to you how it is to have an earthquake. I know every one of us have felt earthquakes, but have that lasts for 5.5 minutes is incredible. I'm sitting in my car watching the streets go by at eye level, and everything falling apart. So that was an experience, and I guess I can say I'm glad I got to see that. There was death and a tremendous amount of
Destruction.
buildings were just smashed. Anything that was cement or blocks fell apart. Glass and wood did the best. So anyway, my brother-in-law Louis and he had this crazy thought that we ought to build ourselves a dairy, a drive-in. Most of you probably don't remember, but there's drive-in dairies around in Bellingham and I think Mount Vernon where you actually drive through, like a drive-through restaurant, only you sell milk and bread and cheese and I don't know what all we sold, but the walk-in was facing the street, so you just hand it through the car windows. And it was an amazing deal, and we did all the processing. And so we left, after a while, we left Karen and Louis, and we moved back to Sumas. We were only up there 3 years, I think. And I went to farming with Ross and Evelyn Massey. And we farmed for probably 9 years, I don't. Anyway, it wasn't good. I mean, there's wonderful people, but it was tough to make a living. 68, we had the horrible storm that lasted all winter, and then we still had snow drifts in our yard in May. That was tough. So I talked to Louis Hovde, who was the banker, and I asked him, if you ever hear of a business that comes up for sale, I think we'd like to do that. Or should I say, I would like to do that. And so we bought Henderson's drive-in restaurant. And if you're wondering, it's the same as Bob's now. And we did a lot of changes there and changed the building a lot and kind of done away with the drive-in part and made a restaurant out of it. And we were there for 17 years, Spud's family restaurant. And some hard things. Restaurant business is hard. I forgot to tell you one thing. I was thinking about decisions we make to run off with a lady on the side of the road and go to Alaska. That's a big decision. Here's one of the decisions, the worst decision I've ever made. The day after I graduated from school, or the night after, I drank a bottle of beer. First time I'd ever tasted beer. I don't have anything against beer at all, but it held me captive. And it wasn't long, and I was drinking a lot more than one bottle of beer. And for probably 16, 17 years, I don't remember. I think even though I was able to operate a restaurant, I was always going up to my friend Roy, had the tavern here, and we would sit there lots of times in the summertime. The sun would be coming up when I would go back to the restaurant. We drank a lot of beer. And pretty quick it becomes who you are. And you do things you shouldn't do. And I did. And I know about these things. And you name it, I've probably done it. And I'm not here bragging about that. It's a shameful thing, some of the things I did. Another decision I made was one of the best decisions, I have two, was picking up that gal along the road. Best wife a man could ever have. 55 years we've been married now. I don't know how she's done it. About we bought the restaurant in 73, so I'm going to guess this would have been 1979. Yeah, probably. I was getting so down, and the booze was taking me down, and I was getting down. Guilt was all over me. And I was driving down the road, I don't know, on a highway somewhere. And I cried out to Jesus. Jesus, if you're real, I need you. That's a pretty simple prayer, isn't it? Help. I can't go on. I tried quitting drinking every morning with that headache, but was right back at 12 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night doing it again. I couldn't quit, and it was destroying me and my family. And it was either or. Now, that day, Jesus Christ became a reality in my life. It wasn't that something I read. It wasn't anything like that. I always had guilt all over me. And that day, while I was driving down the road, when I cried out, I felt the guilt leave, as sure as I'm looking at you guys. And I have always said 100 pounds of spuds was taken off my shoulders. It was an amazing thing. I didn't know what was going on. All I knew was Jesus heard me. And it changed my life. I'm still Spud, but I was born again right there on the highway. A new heart. I look at things so much different. And I don't have to argue about if there's a Jesus or not. I know there's a Jesus because he took that guilt from me right there on the highway, and I felt it go. From that day forward, I've been trying to be a good sheep. I've seen marvelous things. I've been a part of marvelous things. And it's always Jesus. And I don't know, I'm not trying to preach here. I'm telling you the truth of a man's life. I wouldn't be here, I know that for sure, if I didn't know Jesus and know him personally. In 1980, here's one of the good decisions we made. In 1986, two families besides my wife and I put together an evangelistic crusade at Nooksack High School at the football field. And 4 nights, we had people every night, but the last night on a Sunday night, it was full of people. And people went forward and met Jesus. I actually think those things have just been a part of my life ever since. We had a Bible study that went for over 30 years on Monday night, started at Spud's restaurant. And the only reason it stopped for a while is because I was taking care of Mom and helping with Joe. So, and about, 2 months ago, it started again. I was allowed by the Lord Jesus to lead 5 to 6 Bible studies a week for years and years and years, sometimes 7. It isn't because I'm smart. It's because the Lord allowed me. And I've been with so many people. I don't deal with denominations anymore. Are you Jesus followers? Every one of us have different beliefs. But are you a Jesus follower? And that's who I am. The Lord has allowed me to do that for 37 years now. And had a lot of jobs. The city gave me a job that's perfect for me. I take care of the Sumas City Park and the Sumas Cemetery. I absolutely love it. And I'll tell you one of the reasons I love it. There's summertime especially. People come to see Aunt Charlie's, Aunt Grace's stone. And I may not know that person. I may not know the person that's there in the ground, but I can almost bet you that I know the family. I've been here a long time. And we can tell stories about families. And it's been a real blessing to me to be able to talk about their family because they lived here. And I lived here all my life. I can't say that anyone could ever live in a better place than Sumas. I always say, oh man, I can't leave this place. But I can. Years ago, we bought a house in Sudden Valley, a beautiful house, right on the golf course. How could it be any better than being on the golf course? I loved to golf, or I used to when I could hit it. One day I said to my wife, bless her heart, honey, I think Jesus wants us back in Sumas. She had told me a team of wild horses couldn't drag me out of here. So when I said that, I thought I was going to get thrown out of the house. You know what her answer was? I know we do. We need to get back. That's where we belong. Sumas has been so good to me. And people ask me, and I'll close with this, and this is maybe a strange way of looking at things. But the pioneers, the older families in Sumas, I still knew some of the old folks, the Gargets. I'm not going to try to name all of them, but one of them I remember and loved so well was Jim Bromley. He had the barber shop, but in the barber shop was fishing tackle. It don't get better than that. But mostly I would go there on a Friday night because that was the night that the loggers came to town. And every logger that came into Jim Bromley's for a haircut, the first thing they would do is walk into the bathroom with Jim. And they were laughing more when they came back out. And Jim had a bottle. But I loved the guy a lot. And how many guys can sit and listen to a bunch of loggers tell logging stories? I just loved it. And it was just a precious place for me. But Sumas has been precious for me. I'm just a blessed guy. Totally blessed. Thank you. Any questions? Anybody want any questions? Yes.
How did you get the name Spud?
I don't know. Next. I'll tell you what I think, but I don't know if it's true. Do you guys? Well, some of you would remember the Cats and Jammer Kids and the funny papers. Oh, there's a shit. Yeah, you do. Anyway, there was a little fat guy who was named Spud, and I think that's where Joe got it. I don't know. Yes.
When did your family actually settle here?
You mean my folks' family?
Yeah.
Well, my wife's side, they didn't.
No, but your dad?
Yeah,
was from-
well, Sumas, it was my dad was the first one here. They lived in Linden, and they came from Michigan.
And then what year did they settle in this area then?
No idea.
Okay.
Well, when I went in the toilet, that was pretty close to when they moved here.
They got married in 37, so.
37, but they didn't come here right away. I know that.
Close to that time.
Yes.
Did you let Jim Bromley cut your hair after he'd come out of?
You know, Jim Bromley, he had a special rub. My kids called it the Jim Bromley rub. And I bet Jim Hessegrave had one of it. He would get his hands on your head. That was a Jim Bromley rub. My kids hated it. But it was worth it because I got to go see or hear them
Remember the
stories.
stuff he put in his grill cream and something else, that white,
I don't know, but he wanted it to get all the way in. I know that.
I could smell it.
There, yes.
You mentioned the doctor above.
Yeah.
What doctor was that?
Yeah, I was trying to think of his name. He was a good one because he patched me up.
Was it Sarvis?
No, there was 3 doctors at that time, I think.
There's a Dr. Judkins.
Yeah, it was before him. He did my,
Oh, yeah, it was Doc Nugent. If
No.
you went up above the tavern, Doc Nugent was there, if that was you.
no, it wasn't him either.
Dr. Sarvis, Dr.
Uh,
Gar. Dr. Sarvis.
The one you said, Doris,
Dr.
took
Sarvis.
no, the one before that.
Judkins.
Yes,
Who?
Dr. Judkins.
and maybe that's who. Anyway, I don't remember. But when I was 7, I had ruptured appendicitis, and one of the doctor's mom called, and he stopped at the house. No, he's been eating too many green apples, and which I had, but I really had a bellyache. When Dr. Judkins came back from the hospital, all the doctors used to go to the hospital and take care of their patients and come back. He pulled in the driveway, he come into the bedroom and looked at me, and he touched me a little bit, and he says, "We're going to the hospital right now. He's got ruptured appendicitis." So that
Joe?
huh?
Wasn't that Joe?
Joe had it after me,
Oh.
and Dad had it before me.
I don't remember you, but I remember Joe.
It wasn't a pretty sight, but Joe had peritonitis set in, so he had 2 operations. Any more thoughts? There's some pictures up here if you want to take a look at the family.
I just want to say your dad had beautiful, beautiful horse in that pasture all those years.
Ginger, wasn't it?
That was
No, it wasn't Ginger. And he had a Palomino, you mean?
No, it was brown.
Okay, that's the horse. That was the one that I got. You know, I didn't have a car, so that's how I got around.
What was its name?
The Palomino?
No, the.
Ginger. She was there. Actually, it wasn't even our horse, and my cousin Punk's horse, but he was left the country, so we had.
I remember your dad riding by our place on the Rock Road on the horse.
Mhm.
The brown, I don't remember Palomino.
Well, that was he got it from the guy that lives right over the little creek, Doris.
Bannerman?
No, your dad-in-law.
Boss.
Van Wertheisen.
Oh,
Well, Phil?
Phil Van Wertheisen. That was, he got it from him.
okay.
Anyone else?
I was just gonna say, Joe moved right, when Donna and I got married, the Bronkemas, we moved in right next door. Spud was 5, so I've known Spud since he was 5 years old.
Sorry.
Probably tell some stories yet.
Oh, yeah.
Have you next up there?
Good ones.
Have that on Spud?
And did you mention your pictures?
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah,
Get her being in there.
Anything else you guys want to know about Sumas? I probably don't know it, but
Did you ever go to the theater?
absolutely. Well, I didn't tell my grandma. She didn't believe in movies, but we got to go once in a while. Roy Rogers, Tom Mix,
Yeah.
the roller rink.
So, the theater was at first known as the Lurk and then turned into the Rose, or the Rose and then the Lurk?
Yeah, I think that's right. The Rose and then the Lyric.
Okay.
That turned into a doctor's office also. Yes.
Did you do a ministry in the prisons?
Oh, I forgot to bring that up.
Were you with Tony Stahl?
Yes, I was. The best thing that ever happened to me, educate me. There's no college that could have taught me like 14 years in Washington County Jail every Friday night.
Tony was married to my cousin.
He was the head guy there. I tell you how it happened. I had a friend that was in jail, and I wanted to go visit him. And I called Tony. I said, Tony, I got a friend in the jail. Can you tell me how to get in there? Yeah, I can. But he says, you don't know this, but I was praying for somebody at my desk when you called to go in and do Bible study. And I could write a book about that, but it was the best experience that I could ever have.
Another good choice.
Mhm.
Another good choice.
Another great choice. You want me to tell you how I got there? The first day I went in, Tony and I'll take you around. And he took me just down the hallways and in the kitchen. And I walked out, I said, I don't know, Tony, I don't think I'm going to like that. He said, you're not supposed to. So he says, try it one more time. Okay? So the next day, or a week, I made an appointment to meet Tony. And in the parking lot, I said, Lord Jesus, if this is where you want me to be, you have to show me, because I hate it. Tony, bless his heart, took me to the isolation, 3rd floor, ugly, ugly place. And he turned me loose. I looked around, he was gone. He told the guard, just let him go in and talk to the guy. I can't tell you what an isolation cell looks like. It's cement with a hole in the door to put the food through, a hole in the floor, and a cement bed. That's it. And no wider than this rug here. And so the guard took me to the first door, and I went in, and it turned out the guy was a professional football player. Now I can talk football forever. So we had a good time together. I prayed for him. I guess I knocked on the door to let me out. Took me to the second one, and for the life of me, I can't remember that second one, but it was fine. It was easy. But he kept saying, you don't want to go into number 3. And so when I got to number 3, he said, let's go to 4. And I said, no, I'm here. I just as well go see 3 too. And so, I don't know. I'm thinking there's a gorilla in there. Obviously, he don't want me in there. But I thought, I'm here for the Lord Jesus, right? So we're going to find out. I went in. And Spud got the shock of his life. Now, you remember, I'm a sod buster. And in 1981 or so, I'd never seen some of the things that we'd see on the radio or TV or newspapers. But I went in and I walked right in there, and here was a young Indian boy from Edmonton, Alberta, dressed completely as a woman. Now, Spud's a sawdust. He lives in Sumas. He'd never seen anything like that. But I come to talk, and that's what the Lord put me there for. So we talked. And I said, I want, like the other ones, I want to pray for you. He said, no. And then so I talked some more, and then I said, I'm going to pray for you. I laid my hand on his shoulder, and I prayed. And when I opened my eyes, there was tears running down his face, and there was tears running down my face. And I got a bolt of love that I've never experienced before or after, but compared to that bolt of love that Jesus put in me for that boy. And I knew when I walked out that door, thank you, Jesus, I belong here. And I was there for 14 years, every Friday night. And I don't know how I can tell you that those tables of Bible studies, like a table like this, there was a blessing all those years. Now, did I want to go? No. I didn't want to go in that door. That door slams and you can't get out. And then there's another sealed door behind that don't have a handle. But that's where the Lord put me. And those guys, I became one. No better or worse than them. And I found out a secret. Jesus Christ does not look down on us. He looks us eyeball to eyeball. And that's how I was. I was one of them. And I'll tell you this as I close. Not because I'm great or anything, but I had a guy say to me in Bible study one night, Spud, you know why we like you so much? And it embarrassed me to have a man say that. He said, and I think this is the biggest compliment any man could ever get. He said, you're not phony. Your faith is real. He says, we know phoniness when we see it. We've lived our whole life has been phony. We spot that a mile away. And I've always thought that it was a wonderful thing to put on a tombstone. He wasn't phony. Amen.